Gentlemen and ladies, we are going to be doing a bit of a dry slash, it's actually wet cleaning at home so that we can save on our dry cleaning costs and the time to drive up and down to the dry cleaner. So I'm going to be using this jacket that a client brought into for us. And the first thing you can check out is what is this made out of? Now this one is a wool, which is fantastic. If you have a polyester, then you don't have to stress quite so much. Let me just look in these pockets while I'm at it. Or like a wool blend, you can stress a little bit less. 100% wool is really the problem child, because remember, wool, if you get it wet and you agitate it too much, it's going to start shrinking in the felting process, which we do not want. But wetness is actually not a problem for wool. It actually handles it quite well. It's just warm water and agitation that will create that felt effect. So we'll start off. I'm just going to take some regular old water, nothing too exciting, and some regular old detergent. This is nothing interesting. You really, because especially now this is a liquid one, you really need very, very little. Maybe you can say like a teaspoon, maybe a tablespoon, because it is quite concentrated. If you're using a powder, it's less concentrated, so you can use a bit more. At the end of the day, you don't really want any suds. Just gonna dilute that in. Now here you can see I've put a towel down. Things can get messy. And even if you're doing this on a waterproof surface, like maybe like the kitchen table or something, unless you have a barrier, the water's really going to go everywhere. So just put a towel down. And I'm just using this rag. This used to be a trouser. This was a client's trouser fitting. Now it's a rag for dry cleaning or wet cleaning at home. And you can use absolutely any rag that you like. So I'm just making sure that this detergent is really nicely mixed through. Now you see this amount of suds, this is actually a little bit too much. I might go around and just dilute that. But what I'm going to do to begin is just put a little bit right over there. Just going to get that nice and wet. Just a little patch, just like that. That is totally enough. And I'm going to let that dry because I want to make sure that there's not some weird reaction between the detergent and my fabric. So I do it here so that it's over the lining and the fabric one time. And I'm just going to let that dry. And I'll carry on once I'm sure that my detergent is not interacting weirdly with my garment. Well, I did actually end up diluting this. And this is the right amount of suds. You don't want to have so many suds that you leave like a residue on the garment. No one's really going to die, but you are the one who's going to have to come and remove that residue. So you'll just swear yourself in the future. But yeah, that 9 times out of 10, it's really not a problem. You don't really see any like bleaching or discoloration happening there. Obviously, if it's very dirty, you do want to see discoloration because you want to see the soap doing its job. But as long as you're not seeing any like obvious discoloration between the original and where you put your little fabric glob, really 9 times out of 10 it's totally fine. But I always just stress about that one time. But anyway, once you are emotionally satisfied that you're not going to burn a bleach coal into your garment, you can then, I always start on the inside. You can then just go around and do like a lafwas, I don't know if there is an English word for that. But at the end of the day, we just go over this whole thing. Now it's not really going to replace a dry clean. It's just going to prolong the time between between needing dry clean. So it's going to keep your suit fresh up until the time when you actually need to go to the dry clean. And I mean, you'll know that. And if you've got good friends, they'll also tell you. If you have bad friends, you'll just notice that they don't hang out with you so much anymore, or they don't like hugging you so much. And then you'll know it's time for a proper dry clean. But like this, you know, you can really go in, because I have so many suits, I don't wear the same one so often. So my suits have a lot of time to dry out in between, or to air out in between. And yeah, so you know, I dry clean once a year. I'll dry clean 1 or 2 of my suits that I think need some TLC. But in general, I just do this every 3 months or so. If I feel one of my suits is getting a little bit too fresh, and this keeps me nice and fresh, keeps me nice and fabulous in between actually heading over to the dry cleaner, getting the whole thing done. Now, of course, problem areas, let's do one thing at a time. So I'm just going to go over this whole portion. So obviously the other side, I'm going to do the exact same thing. So yeah, here I am at the center back. So obviously I'm just going to carry on there. And then just problem areas here, under the arm. Still is a little bit too sudsy for my liking, but we're fine. Here under the arm, and here against the chest. This is really the problem area. So here I just go one more time, just for funsies. Then I'll carry on doing the other side. Now I've gone over this whole thing with the soapy cloth. I gave this cloth a bit of a rinse just to get most of the soap out. And now I'm just taking plain water and in a way doing like a wash and rinse would at the end of the day. You're putting soap and you're coming and rinsing it off with water. Now of course this plain water is going to get soapier and soapier as you pick up more and more of the soap off the garment. But that's just exactly what we are aiming at, is to pick all the soap suds up off of the garment. Now, you know, if you do this regularly, which I never do, this is actually really enough. You know, the outside of your jacket, you can really just clean with a brush, especially 100% wool, which we'll go over in a minute. But if it's been a while and you feel like, wow, this thing really needs a wash, then we're going to do the same kind of vibe on the outside. Now, this particular one, it was in storage for a bit, so that moldy smell is just all over it. We actually need to give this whole thing a good shake up. Now, this you can see, this is too sudsy. This way too sudsy. So I'm actually going to rinse that off before I continue. Like I was saying, if it's not too much of a drama, you can actually clean this whole thing just with a brush. You just brush out any dust, any marks. Just really freshen it up. And if you beat it like that, all the dust will come out and you can just brush that off. You know, this is actually, it's very clean. There's no drama with it. It's just that moldy smell. So, you know, on the outside, you really want mainly water with the tiniest fraction of soap suds. And so this is why you use the same cloth that you use to, in a way, rinse the inside. Use this now to give the outside a wash. And here you really do not want to wet the fabric. You just want, it can be a little bit damp, but definitely not wet. No one will die if it is. It's just better if you don't. And of course, if you see any marks, any unsightly marks, you can give that a little bit extra TLC. An oil stain, there's lots of different strategies you can use. I like to use baby powder. It kind of like draws the oil out of the garment. You can also use bicarbonate and vinegar because they're kind of, that bubbling and boiling reaction tends to loosen up the stain, and you can wipe it off from there. I'm trying to think what other stains you have. Another trick you can use is to iron with a paper bag over the stain, and they can sometimes draw the stain into the paper bag out of the fabric. But water is actually the strongest, I don't know what the word is, thing that dissolves things, dissolver, in the world, because it's such a simple compound. It can kind of get into and bind with absolutely anything. So start with water. And also the trick is speed. As soon as you get the stain, the sooner you get to the bathroom and just soak it, the better. Yeah, so that's now given it a nice brush down. The inside can be a little bit more damp, but it shouldn't be wet. Damp to the touch is fine, but not wet. You can use detergent on the inside, on the outside, very, very low detergent. Then you just wipe it down like this. Now, again, depending on how your suit is doing, ask your friends. Ask those friends that tell you the truth. I will let this dry a little bit and then come back the next day. Now, this one, because, when I was on the inside here, it was a little bit soapier than I like. I'm just going to go over it one more time on the inside, just with this water to, in a way, rinse off that soap. And then the very last step is to dry this out in a very airy room, because it's moist, you don't want it to now become damp and clammy. So you want to dry it on a hanger for sure, and not one of those Injere plastic or metal hangers, one of those nice hangers that holds the shoulder open so that air can really get into the inside of this. And you just want to hang this in a well-ventilated room and just let that air dry. You definitely do not want to tumble dry. No. So you can just let that air dry on a hanger, and that'll be that. Good to go, fresh lesh, saving yourself the trip to the dry cleaner. I think the most important thing to know about this process is that you cannot decide to do it the day of your function, because here we are, day 2, everything's dried out quite nicely, and you don't really have to do this step, but I am extra. So I'm just going to go with plain water and just go over the whole thing again. One more time. So, really the exact same process, just wiping it down. It can be damp, but you really don't want it to be wet. It's not a big drama if it gets wet. What you really do not want, which is why you can't put it in the machine, is the agitation. You can't have that squirming around. That's going to be a complete disaster. So just, moisture like this, totally acceptable. So once again, I'm just going to go over the whole thing. I feel like this, maybe it's just me, but I'm quite sensitive to the detergents. So even though obviously I'll be wearing a shirt underneath this, maybe the pants, I can sometimes get a bit of a rash if that hasn't been rinsed properly, or certain fabric softeners like really react badly with them. That's just me. That's some overshare. Don't worry about that. More importantly, just focus on what we're doing here, which is the exact same thing we were doing yesterday. This time, just plain water. And if I see that the water starts getting soapy, I'll just throw that out and get some more fresh, completely unsoaped water. So I'm going to, of course, go over all of that, making sure I've gotten all the soap off. Now these, like I said, they weren't really so dirty. They were just a bit stuffy from being in storage. So I'm just going to go over all of that. And let me just show you what the hanging looks like. There, they're all just hung up on those hangers that give you a bit of room on the shoulders. You can see the trousers also not folded over. They're hung up with those peg thingies so that everything can air out quite nicely. They're not stacked close together, and they're definitely not in a cupboard. They're definitely out in the open. Now, something I forgot to do yesterday, which is why I like to do this twice, because my brain can sometimes sabotage me, is to get in the seam. See, this is where a whole bunch of dust likes to just gather in. So just get into the seams there and wipe that out. No one will already die. There's a bit of dust in your pants. But since we are doing a clean, that's exactly where you want to clean. This you won't get done at the dry cleaner. So here's a way to actually make your home clean even more fabulous than a dry clean. I don't know how well you can actually see this. Let's switch the light off because these are very dark trousers and it looks like just a black blob. But on the point of just checking for in your seams, obviously also your cuffs. And on that note, those kind of lint balls and dust bunnies and all of that, that's a very easy place to trap odor. So that like moldy smell, you can definitely ease that up if you just get rid of all that lint that's kind of caught up in all those seams. Obviously with a jacket, it's got a lining, unless it's a semi-line. But with pants here, just get into the seams wherever there could be a bit of a lint roll up and just kind of wipe that out. There you go. And the very, very last thing that we'll do is just give this a nice iron and make sure that it's super fresh. So let me start with the trousers. This is going to be the easiest. If you have a crease, you just line it up on the crease. Now, especially if your trousers have been altered sometimes, they tend to shift around. Like you see, this guy's crease is not on the grain anymore because some punk altered this for him and only changed the inside seam. And actually, often when you buy, maybe I shouldn't talk so much trash with someone I don't know. Often when you buy things with stripes, it's actually not like perfectly stripy. Sometimes the stripe is a little bit funny, so you just kind of have to go with how the garment is. Now these trousers are really not creased or anything like that. Again, because we didn't put it through the wash with all of that agitation, we just wiped it on the outside and on the inside. Put this leg over. I think this is a combination of just a factory job, and then see this stripe is actually not too bad. But you got to do what you got to do. Iron that up. Always give my hems a little bit of an extra TLC. Let's get the legs done. So this, I mean, this is really nothing too exciting. Ironing a trouser. We'll look in a minute at the jacket. It's going to be the more exciting one. So, if your trousers are coming out of the wash and they're all nice and creased, you can put a towel in here. I'm just going to use this form because obviously it is the advantage of my job is I have all these things to just give shape. You can also do it all along the waistband. This I'm not too fussed because, like I say, we didn't agitate this with water, so it doesn't actually need a lot of work. Just needs a little bit of a fresh, and then those are the trousers done. The jacket is a little bit more complicated. So look here, this portion under the pocket, this is the flat section. So you iron that out. Now you do have to be careful because of all these seams. You can sometimes shine a seam through. So if you want to be extra, you can put a cloth over this. This is in a flat section, but you don't want to go past the dart. You want to separate the dart and do that, or the other side of the dart on its own. Now you can go around and just look for flat sections because each of these pieces is flat in and of itself. It's given shape by the seams on the sides, but the piece itself is flat. So you can manipulate the jacket to get that onto a flat section. Like this, for example, would be easier on an ironing board because you can put it over the iron. And I could do that, but then I'd have to move the camera. Oh, look at that. I just found that hole that we're going to patch for this gent. So yeah, in this case, I can't really get up into the shoulder. But on an ironing board, that would be a lot easier. So I'm just going all over this thing. And again, on the front, isolating the flat section, which is down here under the pocket, this front portion of the lapel. And then you don't want to iron directly on the dart. Okay. So then, these portions up here, I can use my shape. And of course, you can use a towel or something like this that you've just rolled up. Fold it up a couple times just to give you a nice shape. You'll sometimes feel here that the shoulder pad kind of folds up on itself. So you can just kind of manipulate that out so it's nice and flat. These are totally fine, so that's great. Then lapels, again with the shape. Just going along up to the collar. Same on the other side. Then the sleeves, here you'll have to roll your towel up. Of course, I'm just taking advantage of my job because we have a sleeve board. Yeah, I mean, here there's really very little need to iron. It's just mainly for demonstration purposes and just to make sure that all the wrinkles are out. Just going to go around, iron this whole thing. And That's that. That's caring for your suit at home, saving you the trip to the dry cleaner.